My name is Althea Rowland, and I am 73 years old. I never thought I would be telling this kind of story at my age. I believed I knew my husband. I believed I had seen everything there was to see in a marriage. But I was wrong. Very wrong. Because every Wednesday night, my husband would quietly leave our house, and I would lie in bed pretending not to notice. Until one night, I followed the sound of the door closing. And that was the night everything began to fall apart. Before I tell you what I saw, let me say this first. If you enjoy emotional, powerful stories about real life, strength, and truth, please subscribe, like this video, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next part. And tell me in the comments, what country are you watching from? I want to know who is here with me. Now listen closely. Because what I discovered changed my life forever. It started small. Too small to feel dangerous. Every Wednesday night, around 10:15 p.m., my husband would stand up from the couch and stretch like a man going to bed. "I'm tired," he would say. "I think I'll step out for some air." At first, I didn't question it. We had been married for 46 years. When you are married that long, you stop asking questions. You start trusting habits. He would put on the same dark jacket, the same worn shoes, pick up his keys quietly, and then the door would close. Click. Every time. He never kissed my cheek. Never said goodnight. Just gone. And he always came back after midnight. The first time I noticed the pattern, I told myself I was imagining things. The second time, I told myself it was none of my business. By the third Wednesday, my stomach began to tighten. By the fourth, I stopped sleeping. Because something about the way he moved felt secretive. Not rushed. Careful. One night I asked him, "Where do you go every Wednesday?" I said casually, folding laundry. He didn't look at me. "Just out," he replied. "Out where?" I asked. He shrugged. "To think." That answer felt cold. But I let it go. That's what I always did. Weeks passed. Then months. Every Wednesday, same time. Same jacket. Same keys. Same silence. My body knew something was wrong before my mind accepted it. I would lie in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the clock tick. 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 Waiting for the door. Click. And every time I heard it, my heart would sink a little deeper. One Wednesday, I followed him to the door. Quietly. Bare feet on cold tile. I stood behind him and said softly, "Be careful out there." He froze. Just for a second. Then he nodded. "Always am," he said. And walked out. That pause told me everything. The next morning, I looked at his jacket. It smelled different. Not like the night air. Not like smoke. Something unfamiliar. That was when the fear settled into my bones. I spoke to no one. Not my daughter. Not my church friends. Not even myself. Because once you speak fear out loud, it becomes real. So I stayed quiet. Until one Wednesday, my neighbor knocked on my door. "Your husband drives out late every week," she said kindly. I just wanted to make sure everything is okay. I smiled. Said yes. Closed the door. And sat down slowly. Because now I knew. It wasn't just in my head. That night, I made a decision I never thought I would make. I was going to find out the truth. Not by arguing. Not by begging. Not by crying. But by watching. The next Wednesday, while he was in the shower, I took an old phone from the drawer. I didn't know much about technology. But I knew how to press record. I hid the phone near the front door, angled toward the hallway. My hands shook so badly, I almost dropped it. I told myself I was being foolish. I told myself I would delete the video later and forget all about it. But deep down, I knew I wouldn't. That night, he left like always. Click. I waited. 10 minutes. 20. Then I walked to the phone. My heart felt like it was going to break through my chest. I pressed play, and what I saw made my knees give out. Because my husband wasn't just leaving the house. He was leaving behind a lie. And the truth he was hiding was bigger than I ever imagined. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I sat on the edge of the couch, staring at the phone in my hands like it might bite me. My knees felt weak. My chest felt tight. I had to remind myself to breathe. In, out, I whispered. The video was only a few minutes long, but it felt heavier than 46 years of marriage. I watched it again. There he was, my husband, the man I cooked for, the man I prayed with, the man I defended when people said he was cold. He didn't sneak out like someone afraid of being seen. He moved with purpose. He checked the hallway, adjusted his jacket, slipped something into his pocket. Then he stopped at the door. And for a moment, he smiled. Not a happy smile. A knowing one. That smile stayed with me. I turned the phone off and placed it face down on the table. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound made my heart jump. I kept expecting him to come back early and find me sitting there, caught. But he didn't. He came home after midnight, just like always. I heard his keys. His shoes. The bathroom sink running. Then he crawled into bed like nothing happened. I lay there stiff as a board, staring into the dark. He didn't touch me. Didn't ask if I was awake. Just turned his back and fell asleep. That hurt more than any argument ever could. The next morning, he acted normal. Too normal. He hummed while making coffee, read the paper, asked if I wanted eggs. Yes, I said quietly. My voice sounded far away to my own ears. As I sat at the table watching him eat, I studied his face. How long had he been lying to me? Weeks. Months. Years. I remembered every Wednesday I had ignored my instincts. Every time I told myself I was overthinking. Every time I chose peace over truth. And now truth was sitting right across from me, chewing toast. I wanted to confront him right there. I wanted to slam the phone on the table and say, explain this. But something stopped me. Fear. Not of him hurting me, but of losing what little safety I still had. So I stayed quiet. And I started watching. Over the next few weeks, I became a different woman. Not louder. Quieter. I listened more. I noticed things I had missed before. He started showering before leaving on Wednesdays. He checked his phone more often. He guarded his jacket like it held gold. One night I asked, "Who were you talking to?" "No one," he replied too quickly. That answer told me plenty. I set the phone up again the next Wednesday. This time, I placed it lower, closer to the door. When I watched the video later, my stomach turned. He pulled out a small envelope. Thick. Stuffed. He tucked it into his jacket, looked around, and left. Money. I knew it. But whose? And for what? I didn't tell my daughter. I didn't want to worry her. I didn't tell my friends. I didn't want pity. I carried the secret alone, like I always had. But secrets get heavy. They bend your back. One afternoon, I decided to follow him. Not close. Not obvious. Just enough to see where he went. That Wednesday, I told him I had a headache and went to bed early. I waited. 10 minutes after he left, I put on my coat and stepped outside. The night air felt cold and sharp. I stayed on the other side of the street, my heart pounding with every step. I watched his car pull away. I followed slowly. He drove across town. Past places we used to go together. past streets I didn't recognize. Then he turned into a parking lot. A small building stood there. No sign. No lights on the front. Just one side door glowing faintly. He parked, got out, looked around, and walked in. My legs felt like jelly. I stood there frozen, staring at that door. What was inside? A woman. A business. Something worse. I couldn't move. Fear glued my feet to the ground. After a few minutes, I turned back. I wasn't ready yet. When he came home that night, he smelled different again. Not like perfume. Not like alcohol. Something metallic. Cold. I lay awake, wondering what kind of life he was living, while I sat at home folding laundry. The next day, I went through his old papers. I wasn't proud of it, but I was done being blind. In the back of a drawer, under tax forms, I found receipts. Wednesday dates. Cash withdrawals. Same amount. Every week. My hands shook as I lined them up. This wasn't random. This was planned. That evening, I confronted him softly. "Are we okay?" I asked. He looked surprised. "Of course," he said. "Then why do you feel so far away?" I asked. He stared at me for a long moment. Then said, "You worry too much." That sentence hit like a slap. I went to the bathroom and locked the door. I sat on the edge of the tub and cried silently. Not loud. Not messy. Just tears sliding down my face. I cried for the woman I used to be. The one who trusted easily. The one who believed love meant silence. That night, I made a promise to myself. I would not confront him again. Not yet. I needed proof. Real proof. Something I couldn't explain away. Something he couldn't deny. The next Wednesday, I placed the phone inside his jacket. It took courage I didn't know I still had. When he left, my heart raced. I waited. I prayed. I paced the living room. Hours later, he returned. I waited until he slept. Then I took the phone back. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped it. I pressed play. And what I heard next made my blood run cold. Because my husband wasn't just living a double life. He was someone I didn't recognize at all. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I sat on the bed with the phone in my hands, afraid to press play again. What I heard before was already too much. But I needed to hear everything. I turned the volume low and listened. At first, there was only the sound of his footsteps, then a door opening. A voice I did not recognize greeted him. "Right on time," the voice said. My husband laughed. Not the laugh he gave me. This one was lighter, confident, free. "You know I'm always on time," he replied. That sentence broke something inside me. Because at home, he was always late. There was shuffling, chairs moving, papers being placed on a table. Then the other voice spoke again. "You brought it." "Yes," my husband said, "same amount." "Good," the voice replied. "You know the rules, no mistakes." Rules. My hands started shaking. This wasn't an affair. This wasn't a secret hobby. This was something organized. Planned. Controlled. I listened harder. "Your wife suspects nothing?" the voice asked. My heart stopped. "She's old," my husband replied. "She sees what I want her to see." I covered my mouth to keep from crying out loud. "She won't be a problem," he continued. "She never is." Those words sat heavy in my chest. After all these years. That was how he saw me. The recording ended with laughter. I turned the phone off and sat in silence. My ears rang. My hands felt numb. I had spent decades worrying about being a burden to him. About being too slow. Too tired. Too much. And now I knew the truth. He never saw me as a partner. He saw me as furniture. The next morning, I moved through the house like a ghost. He didn't notice. He kissed my forehead out of habit and asked if I slept well. Yes, I lied. He nodded and left for work. I stood in the kitchen long after the door closed. Then I sat down and cried. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just quiet tears sliding down my face. I thought about calling my daughter. I even picked up the phone. But my finger hovered over her name. How do you tell your child that the man she grew up trusting is a stranger? How do you say, I don't know who I married? So I put the phone down. Not yet. Over the next few days, I paid attention. Not just to Wednesdays. To everything. He guarded his phone like it held his soul. He locked doors he never locked before. He spoke in short sentences. And he watched me more closely. Like he sensed something had changed. One evening he asked, "You've been quiet lately." I forced a small smile. "Just tired," I said. He studied my face. For a moment, I thought he knew. Then he turned away. "You should rest more," he said. That sounded like concern. But now I knew better. The following Wednesday, I did not follow him. I did not record him. I stayed home and waited. Because fear had changed into something else. Clarity. He returned after midnight. I pretended to be asleep. He stood at the side of the bed, longer than usual. I could feel his eyes on me. Then he whispered, "You're still asleep, right?" I didn't move. He sighed and went to the bathroom. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought he could hear it. The next morning, he announced he would be traveling soon. "For work," he said. "How long?" I asked. "Not sure," he replied. That was new. And dangerous. Because distance gives secrets room to grow. That afternoon, I made my first real move. I went to the community library. I asked for help using a computer. The young woman smiled kindly and showed me how. I searched for the address I followed him to that night. What came up made my stomach drop. No business name. No listing. Just complaints. Anonymous reports. Words like shady, cash only, don't ask questions. I leaned back in my chair dizzy. My husband wasn't just lying to me. He was involved in something dark. When I got home, he was already there. That startled me. "You're back early," I said. "Yes," he replied. "Plans changed." He watched me closely as he spoke. Too closely. That was when I knew. He was starting to watch me the way I had been watching him. That night, I locked the bathroom door and whispered to my reflection. "You need help," I said. Not from him. From the truth. I hid the phone somewhere he would never look. Inside an old sewing box he always called useless. Then I waited. Because I knew the next Wednesday would be different. He would sense the shift. And when men like him sense change, they make mistakes. Big ones. The next Wednesday came. He didn't say a word. Just put on his jacket and reached for his keys. As he opened the door, he turned back and looked at me. A long look. Too long. "You okay?" he asked. "Yes," I replied calmly. He nodded. And left. Click. I waited. 10 minutes. Then I stood up. Because this time, I wasn't just watching. I was ready to expose everything. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I did not rush after him. That was the first thing I learned. Rushing makes noise. Rushing makes mistakes. I waited. I counted slowly in my head, the way I used to count my daughter's breaths when she was a baby and had a fever. 1, 2, 3. When I reached 60, I stood up. My legs felt stiff, but my mind was clear. Clearer than it had been in years. I put on my coat and stepped outside. The night air wrapped around me like a warning. The street was quiet, too quiet. I stood on the porch for a moment, listening. No footsteps. No voices. Just the hum of distant traffic. I walked to my car slowly, careful not to make noise, and pulled away from the curb. I stayed far behind him this time. 2 cars back. Then 3. I did not want him to see me. I just wanted to know. He drove the same route. Past the old grocery store. Past the empty park. Past the street where the lights always flickered. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Every turn confirmed what I already knew. This was no accident. This was a routine. When he pulled into the parking lot, I did not follow him in. I parked across the street, half hidden by a tall hedge. From where I sat, I could see the side door of the building. It was already open. A man stood there waiting. Tall, broad shoulders, dark coat. He checked his watch. Then my husband's car door opened. They shook hands. That image alone made my chest ache. My husband had not touched me with that kind of confidence in years. I watched them go inside. The door closed behind them. The light above it flickered once, then steadied. I sat there frozen, my breath shallow, my hands cold. Part of me wanted to drive away, to pretend I never saw this. But a louder part of me whispered, "You didn't come this far to stop now." I waited. 5 minutes. 10. I looked at the clock on the dashboard. My heart pounded with every passing second. Then I saw movement. A different car pulled into the lot. Then another. And another. People walked in through the same door. Some looked nervous. Some looked confident. All of them looked like they knew exactly where they were going. My stomach dropped. This was bigger than my husband. I pulled out my phone and took pictures. Not many. Just enough. The building. The cars. The door. My hands shook so badly, I almost dropped the phone. I whispered to myself, "Steady, Althea, steady." After almost an hour, the door opened again. My husband came out. He looked different. Lighter. Satisfied. He spoke to the man again, nodded, and walked back to his car. I sank lower in my seat. He didn't see me. Thank God. I waited until he drove away before starting my engine. I did not follow him home. I went somewhere else. Somewhere quiet. I needed time to think. I parked near the river, turned off the car, and sat in the dark. My whole body felt heavy. Not weak. Heavy with knowledge. I thought about all the Wednesdays. All the lies. All the nights I lay awake, wondering what I had done wrong. None of it was about me. Not one bit. I went home much later than usual. The house was dark. He was already asleep. I stood in the doorway and looked at him. He snored softly, peaceful. I felt something strange. Not love. Not hate. Distance. That night, I did not cry. I opened my notebook and wrote, "My husband is not who I thought he was. And I am not who he thinks I am." I closed the book and hid it. The next morning, he watched me closely. "You were out late," he said. "Yes," I replied calmly. "Where did you go?" he asked. I met his eyes. "Out," I said. The same word he always used. His jaw tightened. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. That afternoon, I received a call. From an unknown number. I let it ring. Then ring again. Finally, I answered. "Mrs. Rowland," a man said politely, "we need to speak with you about your husband." My heart stopped. "Who is this?" I asked. "I can't say much on the phone," he replied, "but it's important." I swallowed hard. About what? I asked. There was a pause. Then he said quietly, about the place he goes every Wednesday night. My hand went numb around the phone. Because whatever my husband was hiding, someone else had noticed too. And now, they were calling me. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I sat down slowly after that phone call, like my legs forgot how to work. The man's voice kept replaying in my head. About the place he goes every Wednesday night. My hands were cold, my mouth felt dry. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at the wall. I had spent weeks chasing the truth in silence. Now the truth was chasing me back. I called the number again. Straight to voicemail. I left nothing. No name. No question. I wasn't ready to speak yet. That night, my husband came home earlier than usual. Too early. He dropped his keys loudly on the table. You didn't cook, he said. I wasn't hungry, I replied. He looked at me for a long moment. You've changed, he said. I smiled faintly. So have you, I replied. That made his eyes narrow. We ate in silence. The sound of his chewing felt too loud. Finally, he spoke. You get strange calls lately, he asked casually. My heart jumped, but I kept my voice steady. No, I said. He nodded slowly, watching my face. That's when I knew. He suspected me. That night, I pretended to sleep. I heard him get out of bed. He walked softly down the hallway, then stopped, right outside the bedroom door. He stood there for a long time. I held my breath. Finally, he walked away. My heart didn't slow down until morning. The next day, I went back to the library. I searched deeper. Court records, business filings, old news stories. The building address kept coming up, connected to different names. Different shell businesses. All closed. All cash-based. No owners listed. My stomach twisted. Whatever was happening, there was meant to stay hidden. When I got home, my husband was already there again. This time, he didn't pretend. Where have you been going? He asked sharply. To the library, I said. Why? He snapped. To read, I replied. He laughed without humor. You don't read. I looked at him. I do now, I said. That was the first time I saw real fear in his eyes. That evening, I called my daughter. My hands shook as I dialed. Mom, she answered cheerfully. I swallowed hard. Sweetheart, I said, I need to ask you something. My voice cracked. Is everything okay? She asked. I don't know, I replied honestly. There was a pause. Then she said, I'm listening. That sentence broke me. I didn't tell her everything. Not yet. But I told her enough. Wednesday came again. My husband acted calm. Too calm. He kissed my cheek before leaving. I'll be back late, he said. I know, I replied. That surprised him. He froze for half a second. Then smiled. I didn't follow him that night. I waited. Because the phone call wasn't a coincidence. Someone else was watching. And they wanted me involved. At exactly 10:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. Mrs. Rowland, the same man said, we need to meet. When? I asked. Tonight, he replied. Where? I whispered. He gave me an address. Not the same building. Somewhere else. My heart pounded. I looked at the door. At the clock. At the phone in my hand. If I went, my marriage would never be the same. If I didn't, I would never sleep again. I grabbed my coat. Because, whatever my husband was hiding, I was about to step right into it. And I had no idea if I would come back the same woman. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I sat in my car for a long time before turning the key. The address the man gave me was written on a small piece of paper I kept folded in my purse. I had unfolded it at least 10 times already, checking the numbers like they might change if I looked away. They didn't. My hands were sweating. My heart beat so loud it felt like it was knocking against my ribs, asking to be let out. I kept thinking, you are 73 years old. What are you doing driving into the night like this? But another voice answered, you are 73 years old. How many lies do you want to die with? That was the voice that made me turn the key. The drive felt longer than it was. Every red light made my nerves tighten. Every car behind me felt like it might be following me. I checked my mirrors too often, my eyes darting from side to side. The address led me to a quiet street near the edge of town. No stores, no bright signs, just old buildings and dim streetlights that hummed softly like they were tired of working. I parked a little distance away, just in case. I didn't want my husband's car anywhere near mine. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, counting my breaths again. 1, 2, 3. Finally, I stepped out. The night air was colder here. It smelled like wet concrete and old leaves. I wrapped my coat tighter around myself and walked toward the building. It was small, plain, a single door with a light above it. No sign. No name. Just like the other place. My stomach twisted. Before I could knock, the door opened. A man stood there, mid-50s maybe, clean jacket, calm eyes. He looked like someone who didn't panic easily. Mrs. Rowland, he asked quietly. Yes, I replied, my voice thinner than I wanted it to be. Come in, he said. You're safe here. Safe? That word landed gently on my chest. Inside, the room was simple. A table, 2 chairs. A small recorder on the table. Another man sat in the corner, taking notes. I froze. I didn't know there would be. I started. We're not here to scare you, the first man said quickly. We just need to talk. I sat down slowly, my knees protesting. My name is Daniel, he said. We've been tracking activity around that building for some time. Tracking? I swallowed. And my husband? I asked. Daniel nodded. He's involved, he said carefully, but not in the way you might think. That sentence scared me more than a straight answer would have. He slid a few photos across the table. Cars. People entering and leaving. The same side door. I saw this, I whispered. Yes, he said, and we noticed you noticed. My heart jumped. You were watching me, I asked. Protecting you, he replied. You followed him, that told us you weren't blind. I leaned back dizzy. So what is it? I asked. What is my husband doing every Wednesday night? Daniel looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, he's a middleman. The word felt heavy. Middleman for what? I asked. He lowered his voice. Moving cash, documents, information, things that don't leave digital trails. My mouth went dry. Illegal? I asked. Yes, he replied simply. The room felt smaller. I thought about the envelopes, the smiles, the confidence. He enjoys it, I said suddenly. Daniel looked at me. He feels powerful, I continued. Doesn't he? Daniel nodded slowly. That's usually why people stay in things like this, he said. I laughed quietly, without humor. He always needed to feel bigger than me, I said. I guess this was his way. Daniel leaned forward. We're not asking you to do anything dangerous, he said, but we need to know what you know. I hesitated. Will this destroy him? I asked. He didn't answer right away. It will stop him, he said finally. I closed my eyes. Stopping him felt necessary. But destroying him, that thought sat heavy. When I got home later that night, my husband was asleep on the couch. The television played softly. His jacket lay folded beside him. That jacket. I stood there for a long time, looking at him. He looked small like that. Older. Ordinary. Nothing like the confident man in the recordings. I realized something then. I didn't hate him. I didn't love him either. I just saw him. The next morning, he acted cheerful. Too cheerful. "Morning," he said brightly. "Morning," I replied. He poured coffee for both of us. My hands shook as I lifted the cup. "You seem distracted," he said. "Just tired," I replied. He smiled. The same smile from the video. My stomach turned. Wednesday was 2 days away. Daniel had asked me to call if anything changed. Something was already changing. My husband started watching me more closely. Asking questions. Checking where I went. One night, he asked suddenly, "You wouldn't hide things from me, would you?" I looked him straight in the eye. "No," I said. And for the first time in years, I wasn't lying. On Tuesday night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about Wednesday. About the door. About the envelopes. About the moment everything would finally crack open. I knew this much was true. My husband thought he was in control. He had no idea how close he was to losing everything. And neither did I. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Tuesday night passed without sleep. Not the kind of tossing and turning that comes from a bad dream. This was different. I lay still, eyes open, listening to the sounds of the house like they were speaking a language I was just learning to understand. The refrigerator hummed. The clock ticked. My husband breathed beside me, slow and steady. That sound used to comfort me. Now it felt strange. Like listening to a stranger sleep. I kept thinking about Wednesday. About how many Wednesdays I had lived through without knowing. About how many times I folded his clothes while he was building another life somewhere else. I pressed my hand to my chest and took slow breaths. "You are still here," I whispered to myself. "You are still breathing." That mattered. When morning came, my body felt heavy. My joints ached badly, like they knew stress was sitting on top of them. I moved slowly, refusing to rush myself the way I used to. My husband noticed. "You're moving like an old woman," he said lightly. I looked at him. "I am an old woman," I replied calmly. He laughed. But his laugh faded too quickly. He didn't go to work that day. That alone set my nerves on edge. Usually he left by 8, jacket on, keys in hand, gone. But that morning, he stayed. Sat at the table. Watched me. "So," he said, stirring his coffee, "what are your plans today?" I met his eyes. "The same as always," I said. "How's things?" He nodded slowly. "You've been leaving a lot," he said. My heart skipped. "Have I?" I asked. "Yes," he replied. "Library, errands, walks." He was listing my movements. Tracking me. I kept my voice even. "I'm allowed to leave the house," I said. He smiled thinly. "Of course," he replied. "I just worry." Worry. That word used to fool me. Not anymore. The rest of the day passed like a test. He watched where I went. What I touched. What I said. At one point, he picked up my purse and looked inside. I froze. Then I remembered something important. Fear had already cost me too much. "What are you looking for?" I asked. He glanced up. "Nothing," he said quickly, setting it down. I nodded and went back to what I was doing. But inside, my heart pounded. Because now I knew. He suspected. That afternoon, Daniel called. I stepped outside to answer. "Something off," I whispered. "We know," he replied. "He's nervous." "What happens tomorrow?" I asked. Daniel paused. That depends, he said, on whether he makes a mistake. I swallowed. And if he does? He won't be able to undo it, Daniel replied. Wednesday came too fast. I woke up before the alarm, my body stiff, my mind alert. This was the day. I didn't know exactly how. I just knew. My husband watched me dress. You look nice, he said. Thank you, I replied. He tilted his head. Where are you going? He asked. I thought I'd visit the community center, I said. He nodded. That's good, he said. You should keep busy. Busy? Like I was something that needed distraction. He left the house earlier than usual that night. Earlier than ever. That alone told me something had changed. I waited. 10 minutes. 20. Then my phone buzzed. Daniel. Now. I grabbed my coat. This time, I didn't follow my husband. I followed the truth. Daniel's location was different from before. Closer. More exposed. I parked and walked inside. The room was brighter. Louder. More people. Screens glowed on the walls. Images from cameras I didn't know existed. The building. The parking lot. The side door. And then, my husband. On the screen. Walking in. Envelope in hand. My chest tightened. There, Daniel said quietly. Watch closely. I leaned forward. My husband spoke to the same man as before. But this time, his body language was off. He looked around too much. His smile was forced. His confidence cracked at the edges. Something was wrong. Then it happened. He handed over the envelope. The man opened it. Stopped. Looked up. Said something sharply. My husband's face changed. Confusion. Fear. Anger. He shook his head. Raised his hands. Said something I couldn't hear. The room went still. Daniel's voice was calm. That's the mistake, he said. My heart dropped. What did he do? I asked. He brought the wrong thing, Daniel replied. Or someone followed him. I closed my eyes. He hadn't followed the rules. And in worlds like that, rules are everything. On the screen, men moved. Doors closed. Phones came out. My husband stood there, small and stiff. The power he loved so much drained right out of him. I felt something unexpected. Not joy. Not relief. Sadness. Because even now, part of me mourned the man I thought he was. Daniel turned to me. You should go home, he said gently. Tonight will be loud. I nodded. I didn't want to watch anymore. When I got home, the house was empty. No lights. No sound. I sat in the living room, waiting. Not afraid. Just ready. Hours passed. Then I heard the door. Slow footsteps. My husband entered. He looked different. Sweat on his brow. Hands shaking. Eyes wild. He froze when he saw me sitting there. You're awake, he said. Yes, I replied. He dropped his jacket. The envelope was gone. Where were you? He asked suddenly. I met his eyes. Out, I said. The same word. His mouth opened. Closed. He sat down heavily. For the first time in decades, he looked old. I need you, he whispered. That sentence echoed in the room. I felt something settle inside me. Clarity. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He looked at it. Then at me. Fear filled his eyes. And in that moment, I knew. The double life he built every Wednesday night had finally turned against him. And tomorrow, nothing would be the same. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. The house felt different the moment my husband walked in. Not quieter, not louder, just thinner, like the walls themselves were listening now. He stood near the door for a long time, staring at the floor like it might give him instructions. His shoulders were slumped. The jacket that once made him look important lay crumpled on the chair like it had lost its purpose. I stayed seated. I didn't rush to him. I didn't ask questions. For once, I let silence do the work. "You didn't go to bed," he said finally. "No," I replied. He nodded, still not looking at me. "I had a rough night," he said. I almost smiled. "Almost." "You look tired," I said. That made him flinch. He moved to the kitchen, poured himself a glass of water, and drank it too fast. Some spilled down his chin. He didn't wipe it away. That told me everything. This was not a man in control anymore. He turned suddenly. "Where were you tonight?" he asked. I met his eyes. "Out," I replied calmly. The same word again. His mouth opened. Closed. He stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. "You followed me," he accused weakly. I shook my head. "No," I said, "I watched you." There was a difference. He sank into the chair across from me. His hands trembled. "I messed up," he whispered. I stayed quiet. When someone finally admits the truth, you don't rush them. "I trusted the wrong people," he continued. "I didn't know they would turn." I felt something harden inside me. "They didn't turn," I said softly. "You were never loyal to begin with." He looked at me sharply. "You don't understand," he snapped. I leaned forward slightly. "Oh," I said, "I understand more than you think." He laughed suddenly. A short, bitter sound. "You think you're better than me now," he said. I shook my head. "No," I replied. "I think I'm free." That word hit him harder than anger ever could. The rest of the night passed in fragments. He slept on the couch. I slept in the bed. But sleep didn't really come to either of us. Every hour, I woke up listening. Every hour, I felt calmer. Because fear had finally burned itself out. In the morning, he was gone. No note. No explanation. Just his jacket missing and the house empty. I made tea and sat at the table. My hands were steady. That surprised me. Around noon, Daniel called. "He left town early this morning," he said. I closed my eyes. "Is he?" I started. "He's not in danger," Daniel said, "but his access is gone." "Gone?" I asked. "He can't go back," Daniel replied. "Not without consequences." I nodded. "That's his problem now," I said. Daniel was quiet for a moment. "You're stronger than you know," he said. I smiled faintly. "I had a lot of practice," I replied. The days that followed felt unreal. Neighbors noticed his absence. People asked questions. I answered honestly. "He's away," I said. I didn't explain. I didn't defend him. I didn't protect his image anymore. That alone felt like healing. One afternoon, my daughter came to visit. She hugged me tightly the moment she walked in. "Mom," she whispered, "you look different." I laughed softly. "I feel different," I replied. We sat together at the table. She didn't rush me. She waited. Finally, I told her. Not everything, but enough. Her face changed with every word. Shock. Anger. Grief. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "For what?" I asked. "For not seeing," she replied. I reached across the table and held her hand. "You were a child," I said. "It wasn't your job." That night, my phone buzzed. A message from my husband. "They're watching me. I don't know what to do." I stared at the screen, then typed one sentence. You should have thought of that on Wednesday nights. I turned the phone off because I was done being his shelter. A week passed, then another. No contact, no drama, just silence. The kind of silence that heals instead of hurts. I began going to the community center more often. Talking, listening, living. One evening, as I sat by the window, I realized something important. I was no longer waiting for the other shoe to drop. For years, my life had been shaped by anticipation. Anticipating moods. Anticipating criticism. Anticipating lies. Nah, there was nothing to anticipate. My husband called one last time. His voice sounded hollow. They took everything, he said. I listened. I don't know who I am without it, he continued. I took a breath. You never knew who you were with me either, I said. Silence. Then the line went dead. I set the phone down and looked at my reflection in the window. Older. Yes. But standing. Standing without fear. Standing without apology. The woman staring back at me had survived a marriage built on secrets and silence. And she was still here. Tomorrow would bring the final chapter. Not with shouting. Not with revenge. But with truth settling into its rightful place. And when that happened, nothing would ever belong to him again. Not my voice. Not my time. Not my life. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. The house stayed quiet for days. Not the kind of quiet that feels lonely. The kind that feels like something old has finally stopped breathing. I woke up each morning expecting panic to return, expecting fear to creep back into my chest like it always had. But it didn't. Instead, there was a calm I didn't trust at first. Calm had never lasted long in my marriage. I moved slowly through my days, listening to my body again. When my knees hurt, I rested. When my back ached, I sat. No one complained. No one sighed loudly to remind me I was inconvenient. That alone felt like a miracle. My daughter began calling every evening. Not to ask questions, just to talk. How was your day, Mom? She asked one night. I smiled. Peaceful, I replied. There was a pause on the line. I like hearing that, she said. So did I. People in the neighborhood noticed his absence. Is your husband traveling? One woman asked. Yes, I replied. I didn't lie. He was traveling away from my life. I no longer felt the need to explain him to anyone. One afternoon, Daniel called again. They're done with him, he said plainly. I sat down. What does that mean? I asked. It means he's out, Daniel replied. No more Wednesdays, no more envelopes, no more pretending. I nodded slowly. And me? I asked. You're free, he said. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. That evening, I opened my old sewing box. The one he always mocked. Inside were small things I had saved over the years. Buttons, notes, old photos. I found a picture of myself from long ago. Younger. Smiling. I touched the image gently. I forgot you, I whispered. But I remembered now. My husband called again a few days later. I almost didn't answer. But I did. I don't have anywhere to go, he said. I closed my eyes. You should have thought about that, I replied. I thought you would always be there, he said. That sentence said everything. I was, I replied. You just didn't see me. Silence followed. Then he hung up. That night, I slept deeply. Not because everything was resolved, but because I finally was. I started going out more. Not far. Just enough. I joined a small group at the community center. We shared stories. We laughed. Sometimes we cried. One woman said, I thought it was too late to start again. I smiled at her. "It's only too late when you stop breathing," I said. She nodded slowly. One morning, I realized something else. I hadn't checked the door in days. I hadn't listened for footsteps. I hadn't jumped at the sound of keys. My body was learning a new language. Safety. A letter arrived one afternoon. No return address. Inside was a short note. "I never thought you'd leave." I stared at it, then folded it neatly and placed it in the drawer. I didn't respond. Some truths don't need answers. As the weeks passed, my life began to feel like my own. Simple. Quiet. Honest. I cooked what I liked. I slept when I needed. I spoke when I wanted. No more pretending. No more shrinking. But I knew one thing. There was still one final moment waiting. One last truth that needed to settle. Not for him. For me. And when it came, I would face it standing. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. The truth did not arrive loudly. It didn't knock on my door or ring my phone in the middle of the night. It came softly, the way peace often does when you finally stop fighting it. I was sitting by the window one morning, watching the sunlight stretch across the floor, when I realized something had changed inside me. I wasn't waiting anymore. For years, my life had been built around waiting. Waiting for my husband to come home. Waiting for his mood to change. Waiting for the next lie to reveal itself. Waiting for fear. Now, there was nothing to wait for. And that felt strange. And beautiful. I made myself breakfast slowly. Eggs the way I like them. Toast warm, not burnt. Tea steeped just right. No one complained. No one corrected me. No one sighed loudly to let me know I was taking too long. I sat at the table and ate in silence, but it wasn't the painful kind of silence I lived with for decades. It was gentle. My daughter came over later that afternoon. She stood in the doorway for a moment, just looking at me. "You look lighter," she said. "I feel lighter," I replied. She hugged me tightly. "I didn't realize how much you were carrying," she whispered. "Neither did I said honestly. We sat together on the couch, our shoulders touching. She didn't ask about her father. I didn't bring him up. He no longer lived in the center of my story. That evening, I took out my notebook again. The same one I had been writing in since the night everything changed. I flipped through the pages slowly. Page after page of truth. Of fear turning into courage. Of silence turning into words. I reached the last blank page and wrote one sentence. "I am not afraid anymore." I stared at the words for a long time. Then I closed the book. A few days later, my phone rang. It was him. I didn't answer right away. I let it ring. Then I picked up. "Althea," he said quietly. His voice sounded smaller now, thinner. "I just wanted to hear your voice," he said. I took a breath. "You've heard it for decades," I replied. "You just never listened." There was silence. "I lost everything," he said. I didn't rush to comfort him. I didn't apologize. "I lost myself," I replied. "That was worse." Another silence. "I didn't think you'd ever leave," he said. I smiled sadly. "I didn't think I ever would either," I replied. Then I ended the call. Not in anger. In clarity. That was the last time we spoke. No final argument. No dramatic goodbye. Just the end of a chapter that had gone on far too long. Life after him was not perfect. My body still hurt. Some nights were still lonely. Some memories still came back uninvited. But the difference was this. I faced those moments as myself. Not as someone's shadow. Not as someone's secret keeper. Not as someone's silence. I began doing small things just for me. Walking when I could, resting when I needed, talking when I wanted. I laughed more. I slept deeper. I breathed easier. One evening, as the sun set and the room filled with soft light, I stood by the window and looked at my reflection. I saw an old woman. Yes, but I also saw a strong one. A woman who lived through betrayal and didn't let it harden her. A woman who saw the truth and chose herself anyway. My husband built a double life in the dark. Every Wednesday night, he thought he was clever, in control, untouchable. But secrets rot in silence. And I stopped being silent. I didn't expose him with anger. I didn't destroy him with revenge. I simply stepped out of his shadow. And when I did, everything he built collapsed on its own. This is not a story about a hidden camera, or envelopes, or secret meetings. This is a story about a woman who finally trusted her instincts, who listened to the quiet voice inside her that said, something isn't right. And instead of ignoring it, she chose herself. I am Althea Rowland. I am 73 years old. And for the first time in my life, I belong to myself. If you're still listening to me right now, I want you to take a slow breath. Because stories like this don't end when the words stop. They stay with you. They sit quietly in places you didn't know were still hurting. For a long time, I thought the hardest part of my life was the things my husband did behind my back. The lies, the secrets, the nights he left and came back like nothing happened. But that wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part was how small I learned to make myself so I could survive it. I learned to speak softly so I wouldn't upset him. I learned to ask less so I wouldn't seem ungrateful. I learned to ignore my own fear because I was told that fear was weakness. And when you live like that long enough, you forget who you were before you started shrinking. You forget your own voice. You forget that your life belongs to you. I want to say something clearly, especially to anyone listening who feels trapped in silence right now. You don't wake up one day and decide to lose yourself. It happens slowly. It happens when you choose peace over truth one too many times. When you swallow questions because you're tired of arguing. When you convince yourself that love means endurance, no matter the cost. I did all of that. For decades. And I told myself I was being strong. But real strength didn't come from staying. It came from listening. Listening to that quiet feeling in my chest that said, something is wrong. Listening to my body when it tensed every Wednesday night. Listening to the part of me that knew I was being lied to, even when I had no proof. That voice doesn't scream. It whispers. And most of us are taught to ignore whispers. When I set up that camera, it wasn't because I wanted revenge. It wasn't because I wanted to catch him. It was because I needed to trust myself again. I needed to know that I wasn't crazy. That I wasn't imagining things. That my instincts still worked. And when the truth came out, it hurt. But it also healed something deep inside me. Because the truth, even when it hurts, gives you back your footing. I didn't win because he lost. I won because I stopped losing myself. That's an important difference. I didn't stand up one day and become fearless. I didn't suddenly feel young or powerful or brave. I was scared. I was tired. My body hurt. But I moved anyway. One step at a time. Sometimes people think rebuilding your life means big changes. New houses. New money. New beginnings that look shiny from the outside. But my rebuilding looked quiet. It looked like making tea slowly in the morning. Like sitting by a window without fear. Like answering my phone without my heart racing. It looked like peace. And peace is not loud. If you're listening and thinking, this sounds like my life, I want you to hear this. It is never too late to choose yourself. Not at 30. Not at 50. Not at 73. Time does not disqualify you from truth. Pain does not mean you failed. And silence does not mean you agreed. I spent years thinking that leaving would destroy everything. But staying destroyed me first. And when I finally stepped out of the shadow I lived in, I realized something powerful. People who rely on your silence cannot survive your honesty. You don't have to scream. You don't have to explain yourself to everyone. You don't have to fight. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is simply stop pretending. To the women listening, to the grandmothers, to the mothers, to the daughters, you are not too old. You are not too slow. You are not too late. You are still here. And that means your story is still being written. And to anyone who has ever been told to stay in your place, let me tell you something I learned the hard way. Your place is wherever you are treated with dignity. Anywhere else is not home. Thank you for sitting with me through this story. Thank you for listening without judgment. And if this story touched something inside you, don't ignore that feeling. Sit with it. Listen to it. Because sometimes the story you're hearing isn't just mine. It's a mirror. Before you go, I want to ask you something. Have you ever ignored your instincts because it felt easier to stay quiet? If so, you are not alone. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what part of this story stayed with you the most? Your voice matters here. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories about truth, strength, and quiet courage, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Because sometimes the story you need to hear next is the one that reminds you who you really are.